All right, everyone, welcome to week 3, day 3 of the Paraeducator training course. Today, we're going to finish up our discussion of working with students. Thank you for joining me today. I want to start off by talking about alternative plans. We have been talking in this course, we have been talking in this course about differentiation of instruction. We've certainly been discussing the idea that students finish assignments at different times, be it slower or faster than the larger student body might. So imagine, in a class of 20, 15 people finish an assignment in the expected amount of time, maybe it's 10 minutes. And then some other students take 15 minutes and some other students take 5 minutes. That's pretty normal. Some examples of alternative plans might be a folder you have for each child, each student, with work in it that you could use when you finish a lesson early or when you need to conclude a lesson early. We need to remember, and the supervising teacher will remember for us, but we need to remember also that students who finish early are likely to be the same students who get bored easily. So we need to make sure that the extra stuff that we have in this binder pertains to, it matches up with the things that everyone is working on at that time. So, if you're doing a history lesson about the Suez Canal, then you shouldn't be giving a supplemental activity that's about trade routes in East Asia, right? So they should be related. Okay. Or here's a great way to do both of those things at the same time: to review previous lessons that you've completed with the student. It's always time to review. It's always a good time to review, is what I'm saying. Another thing that we can let students do with their extra time is to work on any homework that they've been assigned. Nobody likes homework, right? So if we are given the chance to complete it while we're still in class, hey, that's great. Gives us more time at home to play video games or whatever we do. What else could we do in an alternative plan? Students can do independent reading. Maybe we can suggest a book to them, or maybe they have a book that they're already reading. Lots of school programs have kids reading at least 2 books a week. They could be shorter, they'll be short books, but yeah, those programs are in place. And it's a great way to fill time is through reading. It's through reading that we become good writers. So we want to encourage that. All right, it could also take the form of a set of educational games or activities that have been pre-approved by your supervising teacher. Games are great because they don't have to match up with the content that's being instructed in the classroom at that time. As long as they are educational in nature, they can kind of be deployed anytime throughout the year. All right, what happens when we have problems? The alternate plans are ways to solve problems. So they are by their nature connected with having problems. They're problematic. When you're having difficulties with the lesson, you need to be able to report the problem to your supervising teacher and to explain the reasons that it was ineffective. This helps the whole program. This helps the whole school year because the teacher may want to adjust the materials that are being made available, may want to substitute or edit those materials. Supervising teacher needs to know what is going wrong and why it's going wrong. So we don't always anticipate, as teachers, we don't always anticipate what's going to happen when we actually deploy something. You never know until you go, we say. You never know until you have actually had real live human beings working on something, how it's going to work out. When we're reporting problems to the teacher, we need to note what kinds of mistakes the student is making, types of errors, kinds of mistakes. and the student's behavior that contributes to the difficulties in completing the lesson. This kind of information helps the teacher plan more effective lessons in the future. This is something that would come up when we have to terminate a lesson early because it's not going well, not because the student finished early. All right, let's not forget that students can become adept at finding reasons to delay or terminate a lesson. This very morning today, my daughter got herself up and went out and poured herself some cereal. She likes it dry, so no milk, and ate the cereal and very kindly put her bowl away and her spoon away and nothing else. We had the open cereal bag on the table, the open cereal box on the table. And I and my wife both asked her about 3 times to put those things away, 3 times each. So she was asked about 6 times. And each time she expertly found a way to divert to do something else. You know, kids behave this way in the classroom, the same as they do at home. They've got we all have our ways to delay doing things that we don't necessarily want to do. So we have to be adept at dealing with those situations. You don't want to be in the position of having to end a lesson early frequently. It makes life more complicated and probably more difficult. So we don't want to have to be doing that very often. If there are problems with the lesson, adjustments should be made before the next lesson. This way, we won't have to make changes the next time. And we can hopefully mitigate for, or just soften the effect of the trouble that we had this time by preparing for the next time. So what should we have done during the lesson? If we did all these things, then we did all we could. We should have tried to motivate the student, to clarify directions and provide assistance and examples before deciding to end the lesson. And I'll say again, and I'll say it again in the future, that starting out the school year or the semester, whatever time frame it is that you're going to be working with these kids, starting out by establishing a good relationship with them is going to yield more benefits to you than any of this after the fact stuff will. So if we start out by building a rapport, building a relationship with the student by doing the things we talked about in the previous lecture, eye contact, student's name, talking about interests, all these kinds of things, the students will find it harder to misbehave. As long as we haven't gotten too close to where they feel like, they're a family member and they can behave as though they're at home. All right, observing and recording. These are 2 of our big duties. Observing and recording student progress. There are a bunch of different ways, a variety of methods to record a student's response and performance. The teacher is going to select the procedures to be used. How we record things, they should provide us with forms to use or something on the computer to use. Whatever it's going to be, they will tell us. The goal, of course, is to choose a simple recording system that doesn't distract from the tutoring activities and relates directly to the objectives in the lesson plan. So I've got a clipboard right here. These are all the supplies that the district has bought for me this year. And I think I stole this one from the office. I don't know. Anyhow, if you are a paraeducator and you're walking around with a clipboard and it's got the recording, the piece of paper, the form that you all use to record, it's going to be completely normal for the students to see you walking around with that every day. If you only bring it out when there's some kind of problem, then it will not be normalized, right? If you only bring out your special pen, oh, this is my coveted pen the district got for me. If you only bring out your special pen when you're recording misbehavior or something like that, that's going to be a signal. It's going to be a signal to the kids, and something you don't want to do. It's like when if you have pets and you're leaving the house and you start like jingling your keys, they know right away and they follow you to the door. You have to say, I'm sorry, you can't come with me. It's like that. Children are not pets, but it's the same kind of thing. We do something unusual that draws attention and it really distracts from what's going on. So you have to make a choice. Are you going to walk around with this all the time or only when something inconvenient is happening? You want to make sure that it's normal for them to see you with your clipboard. And if it's a form that you're filling out on your laptop or some other device, if you're lucky enough to be at a school that has these kinds of things, of course, we want to make sure that the form doesn't make any beeps or noises when we're entering data into it, because that can be super distracting. Always want to make sure our phones are on vibrate, of course, because anytime it goes ding, ding, that's just the end of concentration for the kids. Who is it? Is it your husband? Right. Got to keep those on silent as well. The teacher should explain the purpose of the record keeping system. We have to know why we're recording this stuff, not just it's your job to record this stuff. Why? Why are we doing it? And the teacher should demonstrate the procedures to be used in maintaining appropriate records. So they'll tell us how to do it, and they will expect us to do it that way. Why? Because it makes it easier to record everything in a if we record everything in a uniform way, it makes it easier later to use those data in an IEP or anything else the teacher needs to use it for. Okay, we're always learning from our teaching. Yeah, think about that for a second. They're learning and we're learning. Educators never stop learning. So the evaluation that we're taking, the form that we're using, should lend itself to planning future instructional activities. Why are we gathering these data? Well, it could be for an IEP, or it could be to inform how we plan our next set of activities. Fairly often, tutors are asked to record the students' correct responses in order to determine the level of mastery demonstrated in the tutoring session. Yeah, that's pretty much a major goal of tutoring. Sometimes tutors might need to record the student's exact response, word for word, in order for the teacher to analyze these responses to redirect future instruction. Okay, in a previous lecture, we talked about being metacognitive and metacognition. In that context, we were talking about the young learners being metacognitive. But how about us? How about the educators? I just mentioned that we never stop learning. And we never stop thinking about our teaching. These data, the collection of these data, allows us to be metacognitive, to be meta about what we're doing. Think about what we're doing, the ways we're doing it, how we can change it in the future, adapt it. On evaluation forms, we often have a little section for notes, anecdotal comments, little short narratives, short stories, anecdotal comments about the student's behavior, and any other information that might be helpful in evaluating the tutoring session should also be recorded. I noticed that Johnny seemed pretty tired today. There you go. That's an anecdotal comment. This record of the student's performance is helpful in evaluating the session. For example, if a student has had difficulty during the activity, the teacher and tutor can examine the responses that were recorded and discuss alternative techniques that might be more effective. Okay, as far as record keeping goes, we need to maintain accurate records of the student's performance on each session. We've also got to report any concerns or observations to the teacher and respect confidential information about the student. We will talk more about this in future sessions. But this last one, respecting confidential information, relates to FERPA. There is a law that talks about what information we can give to whom and in what contexts for people who are, for students who are under 18. Accurate observation of a student's performance is important to ensure the accuracy of records. Got to make sure you really saw what was going on when you're recording it. Here are a few things to keep in mind when we are observing. We need to maintain careful attention to the task observed. I know this can be difficult when we have a group of people, and you know, you let me know if you are able to maintain perfect control over another human being. I have not gained that ability yet in my life. So yeah, it can be difficult, I know. But we want to try to maintain careful attention to the task that's being observed. We want to make recordings discreetly. Now, this doesn't mean, we're sort of hiding what we're doing, but we want to, this is a bit of a review here. We want to make sure that we're not making a big deal out of recording things, and that the learners have been socialized to expect us to have something that we're writing on. We want to observe specific behaviors and offer general observations about the environment and student behavior. Okay, these kinds of things can go in the notes section, anecdotal evidence. There are a number of different ways that we can record student progress. The teacher may identify a specific technique to be used within a lesson as far as recording goes. If you come across a specific task that seems to present difficulty for a student, it would really help the teacher if you could keep a record of this. You may be asked to make recordings according to any one of these things. The first of these being rate. Rate shows the ratio of the number of times a specific behavior occurs within a specific time period and the length of the time period. The length of the time period is usually per hour or per minute. Okay, so example. Here I am in my classroom, okay? Oh, I'm looking at the clock. I'm looking at the clock again. Okay, during this lesson, Avi looked at the clock 4 times. Yesterday, he only looked at it twice, right? And you can see that by looking at yesterday's recording and today's recording. So if you have a small enough group of learners, you will have the bandwidth. You'll have the energy and as well as the freedom to be able to record these kinds of things. Okay, let's talk about something else that's not behavior related. Imagine we were working on math yesterday. We're working on math today. In 1 hour, Avi got 25% of the answers correct. Yesterday, 27%, right? This kind of thing. Okay, duration. How long a behavior lasts. Duration is recorded by noting the beginning and ending times of a behavior, and then computing the length, just adding up the length of time during which the behavior occurs. Okay, so maybe I completely turn away and stare at the clock. Avi turned away from the tutoring session and started staring at the clock at 1:26, and he turned back at 1:28. These things are important. It's not because we're trying to enforce some kind of police state with the children. It's because we care about their progress, and if something is not going well for them, these types of behaviors can be indicators of that. Percentage is another thing that we note. It refers to the number of mistakes compared to the total number of opportunities. Percentages are frequently used in scoring worksheets or exams, okay? This one's pretty clear, especially in objective tests, the type of tests that we can administer as paraeducators. You've got a simple mathematics test involving addition and subtraction, okay? And there are 10 questions, and I got 7 of them right. So we write down, we got 70% of the questions right on this test. How about frequency? Frequency is the number of times a specific behavior occurs within a given time period. Frequency can be recorded for the duration of a lesson, the whole lesson, or just for a set time period within a lesson. Okay, let's talk about interval recording and time sampling. Interval recording refers to whether or not a behavior occurs within a given time interval. Okay, so back to my looking at the clock thing. Between 1:30 and 1:35, he didn't look at the clock. Between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, he looked at the clock 6 times, right? Those are different intervals. Time sampling refers to whether or not a behavior is occurring at the end of a given time interval. At 1:30, he was not looking at the clock. By 1:35, he was looking at the clock. And back to anecdotal records, which we referred to earlier. This refers to written notes describing events or incidents that occur. I record these for every one of my adult students when they leave a class, when they have to stop attending a class and go do something else in their lives. I have to write this down in our school's records. And the office is very appreciative when I do that, because they need to know why. They need to know what's going on. Because every school's goal is to retain as many students as possible.
Well, we learned, my assistant and I, we learned something that we call hocus pocus, everybody focus, and I go like that. Hocus pocus, everybody focus. So they just look at me and go like that. Hocus pocus, everybody. And even they finish the sentence and they focus on me. Hocus pocus, everybody. Focus, everybody focus. After they do some exercise, they get so active that we want to calm them. If they're like too overactive, we just say, hocus pocus, everybody focus, and that helps a lot.
All right, so there are a number of different methods like that we can use, and handy rhymes like that one. Another one is 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. But every teacher and paraeducator pair or trio has a set of things that they like to use. Can you think of other ways to get and maintain students' focus? All right, so if we recall from our previous lecture, we talked a lot about the idea that we need to close lessons. That's why in our pretest, we had the question about, is it okay to close a lesson this way? All right, well, we're done, see you tomorrow. And the answer was no, it was false. So why should we bring closure to a lesson? Let's recall some of the things that we talked about and remind ourselves why this is insufficient. And then we ask ourselves as well, how does ending a lesson properly help with the next lesson? And if we think deeply about this, we'll probably come up with ideas such as the one that states that providing closure helps us to smooth a transition to an upcoming lesson and make sure that the students' thoughts are focused on the new lesson and not the one that we had been working on. So let's look at some examples of lessons and think about some language or some actions that we might use to terminate them, to end them. Okay, you have completed a demonstration of how to use long division. Maybe this is not the maybe this is not the most relevant example these days. Long division, I'm not sure it's taught. But imagine you have just finished showing how to do long division. Then you want to transition to a completely different subject. Okay, everyone's going to start working on a different subject. Think about how you might provide closure to that lesson and transition to the next one. Okay, now let's imagine that we have just completed a lesson on sharing. Yeah, this is something that we do teach. It's an interpersonal skill, that students have to learn at a young age. And so we've just completed a lesson on sharing. Let's think of some words that we could use to provide closure on that lesson and move everyone towards the next one. Imagine you have just completed a lesson on the 4 seasons of the year. Wow, there are some good opportunities here to use some clever word play to indicate a transition, since this lesson would be all about transition anyways. So how could we transition from this lesson to anything else we were going to do on that day? All right, we have come to the end of week 3, day 3, working with students. Thanks for sticking with me to the end, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next lecture.